I want to start with the two exits you did prior to Abivax. I mean, both were in the billions, Biobucks/billions. I mean, Corvidia, I think, was $75 million upfront dollars. CinCor was $1.8 billion. That was in cash, which is impressive. Actually, I don't know many people who did two exits like this. But I've also heard that it was not a smooth ride. So could you elaborate a bit more on what happened and what didn't make it a smooth ride?
Well, as you know, biotech is always a bit of a lively experience. So I think in the case of Corvidia, the challenge was that we are developing an anti-inflammatory treatment for arteriosclerosis. And we had been actually in discussion with one of the big pharma fairly early on when I joined. But what they wanted to see was actually the phase 2 completion before possibly doing a deal. The challenge also of the program was related to the fact that the phase 2 was relatively simple to execute. It was a 250 patient trial. But the phase 3 would be more like 3,000 to 5,000 patients with costs probably ranging from $300 to $400 million for the phase 3. So it was clear from a Corvidia standpoint that the step from phase 2 to phase 3 would be a difficult process. And we were preparing actually for an IPO in that context. So we actually ran a sort of a dual approach. One was indeed execution of the phase 2 and seeing whether a partnership could be possible. And still in parallel, trying to raise money for the phase 3 in case a partnership would not happen. So I think what was very interesting is we got actually a first offer from a big pharma company. Again, maybe
not from Novo, from
another one who came about, and the first proposal was we thought was very low. So we told them, we cannot accept. We keep going with our phase 2. But as the phase 2 started to get toward the end, then we had a very productive discussion, actually starting at Jefferies, which was in November, preceding basically the deal. And Novo started to show real interest into possibly looking at our phase 2 data and possibly doing a partnership. So we at JP Morgan organized a more thorough meeting with basically all the research team and R&D team actually of Novo and ourselves to try to come to a potential agreement on conditions for a deal. So Novo followed that procedure and essentially gave us a term sheet in March of that year.
It was quick.
It was quick, but this was upon the condition of success in the phase 2, which, again, could be always argumented and challenged. So we are on one hand very happy, but we had still to wait for the result of the phase 2. And then when the phase 2 results were uncovered, we are obviously very happy with the results, and we communicated that to Novo. But that, in the meantime, so I gave a call to the other party, saying, now we have some great results. Are you still interested, or would you consider, doing a partnership with us? Because we have already a term sheet from a great partner. And I remember vividly because I was actually in my house. This was COVID time, so this was when everything was virtual. I was in my home in near Boston, and I got this call from the head of R&D from this big pharma, whom I knew actually from history, who told me, no, Marc, we are very interested in possibly doing a deal with you, but give us a bit of time because we need to analyze your phase 2 and our confidentiality. But we come back by Friday midnight of that week.
Okay.
So,
Which months are we talking about?
We are probably at the end of we are in June. June of 2020. So then that Friday, at maybe 4:00 in the afternoon, I called the head of BD at that company, and I said, I haven't heard anything from you. Are you going to submit anything? Or because otherwise, the other party is ready to sign. So, this chief business officer says, we are preparing something, but give us a bit of time. We know midnight is the deadline. So I think at 11:30 p.m.
Eastern time or your
time, I got the second bid from second offer from a competitor to Novo, and actually the terms were not very different. So I sent an immediate message to the board. I had given them obviously the heads up that things were cooking, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And then I told them we need to probably organize a board meeting tomorrow to review the two bids and see what you want to do. But I think I would propose we take a bank to help us through the process. So to cut a long story short, we put in place a bidding system. So the bank organized. So by the following Tuesday, we would have essentially competing bids, and the best offer would win. And what was very interesting is the big pharma who thought they would win actually lost to Novo, who actually overbid, and the increase within 2 or 3 days. The terms changed substantially. So it was wonderful for obviously for shareholders. It was wonderful for us, and I think ultimately now Novo is developing. I think I believe they are doing 3 phase 3s for the drug. And hopefully, in the next couple of years, we're going to know whether this drug is going to be a big drug for reducing inflammation and arteriosclerosis in patients.
Yeah. I mean, I heard also, I think it was one of the biggest deals of Novo around that period, or even not ever, but in these years around, they didn't make that many big deals.
That's right. Yeah, it was the first actually. I think it was.
And they lost Abivax. I think Abivax they lost it to Sanofi.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So for Novo, it was a big step forward. And I remember the discussion with Lars, the CEO of Novo, who's actually a great CEO. And he told me, yes, this would be already a big step for them. So obviously, a few years later, Novo is one of the dominant market cap in the world with their drug. But it's been a great deal for us.
No, it's nice. On this outbidding, it reminds me another story, which I forgot the name of the biotech, but it was, I think, last year where they was outbidding 2-3 times, and it went up to $1 billion when the first offer was 5 or 6 times lower.
Yeah.
I mean,
in our case, we said on Tuesday, you need to have your bid by noon. We'll have a board meeting at 1. At 2:00, we'll let you know who was win and who was lost.
That's pretty quick. That's a quick time. But I'm wondering more on the lessons learned, and for you, I mean, as running a biotech, I don't really understand why you wouldn't do such a process or try to get. I guess what's the limiting factors if you have not enough interest from pharma, or what would be the?
No, I think part of the challenge was, in order to finance phase 3, that is going to cost, 300 to 500 million. There are not so many pharmas at the time who would have been interested. And by the way, cardiovascular, you remember, was kind of ignored starting in the mid 2010 period because of exactly these studies that are very big. And you need to do an outcome study, so you need to demonstrate that you're really literally saving lives. And a number of pharmas like Roche and Novartis, just to name a few, had spent up to $700 million in studies, and then everything that's bust because the results were not good. So I think already Corvidia was one of the first, certainly one of the most surprising deal at the time. One, it was because it was COVID, everything was kind of dead. And 2, it was in a therapeutic area where no one would have expected a deal.
Yes, that's amazing. And I guess from what you just said, also on the running phase 3, there's also a good chance that the milestones would be paid, because I think
we hope so.
75 up front, but then there was what 1 point.
Well, there is another 1.4 billion in milestone, 700 million related to basically registration of the drug, and then there are milestones on sales.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I mean, fingers crossed. That. And I mean, I would then also, I mean, cardiovascular already was, I mean, as you said, from big pharma, dropped it or less interest, but especially as a biotech, very few biotechs going there.
Yes.
Also from the size of the trial and the money you need to raise. But you basically with CinCor was also in the cardiovascular space. So and it worked also pretty well. So.
Yeah, because I think, at the end of the day, almost regardless of the therapeutic areas, what you have to try to find is our drugs which can, bring a therapeutic value to patients. And because a lot of companies were in oncology, everyone tend to flock to the same areas. Actually, in cardiovascular, there was not so many assets, but there were still a few good assets. And the CinCor asset was actually a drug that was initially at Roche. Okay. Roche decided to get out of cardiovascular, but they had done all the really very good quality experiments in preclinical setting. And what happened is, an incubator basically negotiated with the help of Sofinnova Investments and Sofinnova Partners the extraction of the drug out of Roche to start developing it, in human clinical trials. But all the foundation of the work was done. It was first-class work from Roche. So for me, when I was contacted again by Sofinnova to be part of this new adventure, I was very reassured that the foundation was solid. It was very solid. The early preclinical work was first class, and also the positioning of the drug was going to be very differentiated from anything that had been, in existence to treat those hard to treat resistant hypertension patients.
Yeah, what then you joined, and then what? Can you go through what happened? I mean, this was even faster than Corvidia.
It was faster, but it was also a fairly lively experience, because a few months into the job, first we got a lawsuit from the incubator, who was in Cincinnati, because we had transferred some of the employees in the incubator into CinCor, which by the way was part of the program. Everybody had agreed to, but there was some question about compensation and things like that, stock options. So we already ran into a lawsuit from with the incubator, was also part of our shareholder basis. So, and in the meantime, I needed to raise funding, to accelerate and to conduct 4 phase 2s pretty much in parallel. So the good news is we were able to raise, summer of 2021, about 190 million in a Series B. That was the first big basis, and then we wanted to do an IPO by the end of the year or early in 2022. And then, as you know, 2021 was the year where things started to shake up, especially in the second half of 21, where it became unclear as to whether we could do an IPO. And then we had this lawsuit. So we eventually, the good story is that we were able to resolve the lawsuit, and then we were able to be out, do the first IPO of 2022. We are the first one listed on the NASDAQ, and actually we did very well, because I think everybody was excited about our program, and again we raised another 200 million through that process. A few months passed. We have the first results of our study in this hard to treat.
Was already the first was the phase 2 results.
Well, a few months later.
Yeah.
And on that basis, it was really successful. And as a result, we were able to do another follow-on, raise another 200 plus. So we basically raised 600 million within a year, which was, again, one of the highest in the world in that period. And while we were doing this, AstraZeneca was actually watching us because they thought, again, this mechanism of action. So it's basically inhibiting a very key hormone that plays a role in hypertension. And they were very interested in this mechanism of action, possibly combine it with their SGLT2 for CKD patients.
Okay.
So, that discussion with AstraZeneca took almost a year to complete before they made an offer. But then, life in biotech, as I said, is never easy. The second phase 2 study that we were doing in a less severe population actually was a disaster.
Okay.
So everything, basically the results were poor, not because the drug didn't work, but essentially the patient we enrolled and the centers that were used, even though they were the same center in the hard-to-treat population, there was a lack of compliance in the study. So basically, the criteria for inclusion were not very well respected by the centers, and we had a huge placebo effect. So actually, this was, I think, one of the worst studies ever seen with a placebo effect of 16 millimeter for mercury. We've never seen that before in any study. So it was an entire disaster. So crazy how. Okay. But the good news was, because we had taken blood samples of the patient at baseline and at the end of the study, we were able to demonstrate over time that, again, that had nothing to do with the drug. It was really poor execution of the trial by the centers, and that actually nothing went wrong. And by the way, we shared it with the FDA. The FDA at the end of the phase 2 meeting did recognize the same thing, and AstraZeneca was able to complete the transaction.
It must be really hard also to frame the story or even explain. I mean, usually the phase 2 results are kind of the headlines or like studies, and then it's like arguing, and every biotech, when there's a a low result, they try to argue, but at least from my experience, it's never that clear that it's like.
No, sure. I mean, when we announced the result, the stock went down by nearly 50%.
Yeah.
But again, because I have a very good scientific team, we are also by great opinion leaders. Because we had such amazing results in this hard-to-treat population, everybody knew it was not making sense. It would not work in the less severe population, right? Because if it works for a very young population, it can't. Yeah. And it had something to do with the design of the study or the way it was conducted. So anyway, just to say, we went from going up, and we crashed, and then we came back, and then AstraZeneca bought us, and in the context of competition, because there was another company that was that would have been interested probably to get bought. But in the end,
did you do also outbidding process there?
So we had some discussion with a few companies, but I think some of them were a bit, shaken by the early population results. So they decided to pass.
Okay.